The silence in the underground command center felt heavier than the 30 meters of reinforced concrete above Admiral Sarah Chen's head. Every screen in the war room displayed the same impossible sight. 17 massive ships hanging in Earth's orbit like metallic vultures circling their prey. Each vessel stretched over 2 kilometers in length, their obsidian hulls reflecting the pale light of the sun in ways that hurt the eyes to look at directly. "Ma'am, we're receiving another transmission," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from his station, his voice cracking slightly despite his best efforts to maintain military composure. Chen nodded grimly. "Put it through, Lieutenant. Let's hear what our uninvited guests have to say this time." The main screen flickered, and the image that appeared sent a collective chill through the command center. The being that stared back at them stood nearly 3 meters tall, its elongated limbs ending in clawed appendages that gleamed like polished obsidian. Its face, if it could be called that, consisted of multiple sets of compound eyes arranged around a vertical mouth lined with rows of crystalline teeth. When it spoke, the words came through the universal translator in a voice like grinding metal. "Primitive inhabitants of the 3rd planet," the creature intoned, each word dripping with disdain. "I am War Commander Zeth Kalar of the Hegemony's 47th Conquest Fleet. Your species has been evaluated and found wanting. Your world contains resources that serve the greater purpose of the Galactic Hegemony. You have exactly 1 rotation of your planet to surrender unconditionally, or we will demonstrate the futility of resistance." The transmission cut abruptly, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Chen stared at the blank screen for a long moment before turning to her assembled staff officers. Around the room, she could see a mixture of fear and determination etched on their faces. "Status report," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Colonel Martinez, her tactical advisor, stepped forward. "All global defense networks are online, Admiral. We've got every satellite-based weapons platform activated, and ground-based particle beam arrays are charging to full capacity. The European Federation reports their new fusion missiles are ready for deployment, and the Asian-Pacific Alliance has moved their prototype railgun platforms into position." Chen nodded slowly. Humanity had spent the last 50 years preparing for this moment, ever since the first detection of faster-than-light signatures at the edge of the solar system had confirmed their worst fears. They were not alone, and the universe was far from friendly. The Global Defense Initiative had consumed trillions of dollars, and the combined efforts of every nation on Earth, all building toward the day when humanity would face its first test among the stars. "What about the fleet?" Chen asked. Captain Williams, the naval liaison, consulted his tablet. "All available vessels are in position. The carrier groups have formed defensive formations around the major population centers, and our submarine forces are ready to launch from underwater silos. It's not much against ships that size, but every weapon we have is ready to fight." Through the reinforced windows of the command center, Chen could see the night sky, though the alien ships were invisible to the naked eye at this distance. Somewhere up there, 17 vessels carried enough firepower to reduce Earth's surface to molten slag. The preliminary scans had detected energy signatures that dwarfed anything in humanity's arsenal. "Ma'am," communications specialist Hayes spoke up hesitantly, "we're receiving reports from around the globe. The ships are taking positions over major population centers. London, Tokyo, New York, Moscow, Beijing. They're spreading out to maximize coverage." Chen felt her jaw tighten. Classic intimidation tactics. Show overwhelming force, demand surrender, then occupy the major centers of civilization to break any organized resistance. It was a strategy as old as warfare itself, just executed on a planetary scale. "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" she asked. "Negative, Admiral. Station Prometheus went dark 6 hours ago, and we lost contact with the Mars colonies yesterday." Whatever these things are, they've been systematically eliminating our outer defenses. The weight of command settled heavily on Chen's shoulders. 58 years old, veteran of 3 different conflicts, and she had never faced anything remotely like this. Earth's military had been designed to fight other humans, not alien invaders with technology centuries beyond their own. "Admiral," Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne called from across the room. The head of the Global Defense Initiative's Xenobiology Department had been studying the transmissions and scanner data since the fleet's arrival. "I've been analyzing their communications protocols and ship configurations. There are some interesting patterns emerging." Chen walked over to Hawthorne's workstation, where multiple screens displayed complex diagrams and data streams. "What have you found, Doctor?" "Their formation is almost ceremonial," Hawthorne explained, highlighting the positions of the alien vessels on a 3-dimensional display. "They're positioned for maximum psychological impact rather than optimal tactical advantage. And their communications. They're broadcasting on frequencies that suggest they expect primitive radio-based technology." "Meaning?" "Meaning they might not realize how far we've actually advanced. Our quantum communication networks, our fusion technology, our particle beam weapons, they might be expecting something closer to 20th century technology levels." Chen felt a spark of something that might have been hope. "Are you suggesting they've underestimated us?" "It's possible. Their scanning patterns have been relatively superficial. They've identified our major cities and industrial centers, but they haven't detected our underground facilities or our more advanced defensive installations." Across the room, an alarm began blaring. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice cut through the noise. "Admiral, we're detecting energy buildups from 3 of the alien vessels. Targeting sensors indicate they're preparing to fire on... Dear God, they're targeting evacuation centers." Chen's blood ran cold. The evacuation centers were where they had moved non-essential civilian populations, mostly children, elderly, and medical patients. According to every rule of warfare humanity recognized, they were protected targets. "Time to impact," she demanded. 90 seconds and counting." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to coordinate defensive measures. Chen watched the tactical display as 3 of the massive alien ships began to glow with an eerie blue light, energy cascading along their hulls like captured lightning. "All defensive platforms, target those 3 ships," Chen ordered. "Full spread. Everything we have." "Ma'am, our weapons can't penetrate their shields," Colonel Martinez protested. "Then we'll damn well try anyway," Chen snapped. "I will not sit here and watch them murder defenseless civilians." The next 60 seconds felt like an eternity. Earth's defensive satellites opened fire first, lancing the void with coherent energy beams that struck the alien ships with brilliant flashes of light. The beams splashed harmlessly against invisible barriers, creating ripples of energy that danced across the ships' hulls like aurora. Ground-based installations followed suit. Massive particle accelerators buried deep in mountain ranges sent streams of charged particles racing toward the invaders. Fusion missiles launched from hidden silos, their drives burning like tiny stars as they accelerated toward their targets. The aliens' response was swift and devastating. 3 beams of coherent energy, each wider than a city block, lanced down from orbit. They struck the evacuation centers with the force of small nuclear weapons, vaporizing everything within a kilometer radius and leaving nothing but glass craters where thousands of people had been moments before. The command center fell silent, except for the soft weeping of a junior technician who had family in one of the targeted areas. Chen stared at the tactical display, watching the readouts that confirmed what everyone already knew. Their most powerful weapons had accomplished nothing except to draw the aliens' attention. "Admiral," Hawthorne said quietly, "I'm reading something unusual. When our weapons hit their shields, there was a brief fluctuation in their energy patterns. Almost like... Like what, Doctor?" like their shields had to actively adjust to compensate. Our weapons didn't penetrate, but they did force the defensive systems to respond. That suggests their technology isn't quite as far beyond ours as we initially thought. Chen looked around the command center at the faces of her officers. She saw fear there, certainly, but also determination. These people had dedicated their lives to protecting Earth, and they weren't about to surrender without a fight. "Get me a direct line to all defense coordinators," she ordered. "It's time to show these bastards what humanity is really capable of." As communications were established with defense installations around the globe, Chen allowed herself one moment to consider the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. 17 ships against an entire planet's worth of weapons, technology centuries beyond their own against human ingenuity and determination. The odds were impossible, but then again, humanity had never been particularly good at accepting impossible odds. Above them, the alien fleet continued its ominous orbit, waiting for humanity's surrender. They would be waiting for a very long time. The response came from every corner of the globe simultaneously. Admiral Chen watched in grim satisfaction as her tactical display lit up like a Christmas tree, each light representing another defense installation coming online. What the aliens had seen as humanity's desperate, futile gesture was actually just the opening movement of a carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction. "Phase 1 protocols are active," Colonel Martinez reported, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "All stealth installations are powering up. The aliens are about to get a very unpleasant surprise." For 50 years, humanity had learned from every conflict in their bloody history. They had studied the tactics of guerrilla warfare, the strategies of asymmetric conflict, and the principles of defeating a technologically superior enemy. Most importantly, they had learned the value of making their enemy underestimate them. The hegemony's scans had detected Earth's obvious military installations, the visible satellite networks, the known missile silos, the surface-based defense platforms that any spacefaring civilization would expect a planet to possess. What they had failed to detect were the hundreds of installations buried deep beneath ocean floors, hidden in asteroid mining operations, and disguised as civilian infrastructure. "Ma'am, receiving confirmation from Facility Prometheus," Lieutenant Hayes announced. "The deep mining operation on the far side of the moon reports all systems green." Chen nodded grimly. Facility Prometheus was humanity's best-kept secret, a massive weapons platform built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, positioned in lunar orbit where it appeared to be nothing more than a routine mining operation. Its fusion-powered mass driver could accelerate projectiles to 30% of light speed. Oceanic installations? "All 12 deep-sea platforms report ready," Captain Williams replied. "Submarine-launched fusion torpedoes are loaded and targeting solutions calculated. The aliens won't see them coming until it's too late." Above Earth's atmosphere, War Commander Zethkalar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the dominant Fang, reviewing the tactical data from the primitive planet's pathetic defensive response. The local inhabitants had managed to coordinate their weapons with admirable speed, but their technology was laughably primitive. Energy weapons that barely registered on his ship's defensive screens, chemical rockets that moved with the speed of insects, and what appeared to be crude particle accelerators. "War Commander," his tactical officer reported, "the indigenous forces have ceased their attack. Their weapons appear to have exhausted their energy reserves." Zethkalar's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. "Predictable. Deploy punishment squadrons to 3 additional population centers. Perhaps watching their cities burn will convince them to surrender before we are forced to demonstrate our full capabilities." 3 more hegemony vessels began charging their main weapons, energy cascading along their hulls in patterns that had struck terror into 100 worlds. This was the standard procedure. overwhelming demonstration of force, followed by systematic destruction until the indigenous population submitted or was eliminated. What happened next was unlike anything in the hegemony's thousand-year history of conquest. The first indication something was wrong came when the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. Tactical Officer Kreshatar stared at his displays in disbelief as dozens of new contacts appeared on the scanner, seemingly materializing from nowhere. "War Commander, I'm detecting multiple launch signatures from beneath the planet's oceans." Before Zethkalar could respond, the deep space sensors registered something impossible. A massive kinetic projectile traveling at relativistic speeds, launched from what appeared to be the planet's single moon. The projectile, a tungsten-cored penetrator weighing nearly 1,000 tons, struck the hegemony ship, crushing Victory amidships. The impact was spectacular. Crushing Victory's shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and conventional projectiles, simply ceased to exist when confronted with a projectile carrying the kinetic energy of a small star. The ship folded in on itself, its hull crumpling like paper before exploding in a brilliant flash of vaporized metal and released energy. "Impossible!" Zethkalar snarled. "The inhabitants are using primitive technology. How did they—" His question was interrupted by another impossible sight. Rising from Earth's oceans came a salvo of fusion torpedoes, their drives burning so hot they turned seawater to superheated steam in their wake. Unlike the clumsy chemical rockets the aliens had observed earlier, these weapons moved with purpose and intelligence, adjusting their courses to avoid the hegemony ship's defensive fire. The torpedoes reached their targets in perfect synchronization. 4 hegemony vessels found themselves engulfed in miniature suns as fusion warheads detonated against their hulls. The ship's shields held for perhaps 3 seconds before failing catastrophically, allowing the remaining energy to carve through alien armor like a blowtorch through tissue paper. "Shields down on vessels 7 through 10, Kreshatar reported, his voice rising to a shriek. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 15. Emergency containment protocols failing." But the worst was yet to come. From hidden facilities across Earth's surface, a new type of weapon emerged. The aliens' scans had detected what appeared to be civilian power plants, unremarkable fusion reactors providing energy for the planet's cities. They had failed to detect that those same power plants were connected to enormous capacitor arrays, capable of storing and releasing energy on scales that rivaled a ship's main weapons. The directed energy beams that now lanced upward from Earth's surface were unlike anything the hegemony had encountered. Instead of the crude laser weapons they had observed earlier, these were coherent streams of accelerated particles, each beam carrying enough energy to power a small city. More importantly, they were tuned to frequencies that slipped through the hegemony's shields like a knife through silk. Admiral Chen watched with fierce satisfaction as 3 more alien ships were crippled by the unexpected barrage. "That's what you get for underestimating us," she muttered. Dr. Hawthorne looked up from her scanner readings, her face flushed with excitement. "Admiral, I'm reading massive structural damage to their remaining ships. Their technology might be advanced, but their materials science isn't that far beyond ours. Kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds can damage anything." "Casualties?" Chen asked. "We've eliminated 6 of their vessels completely, and 4 more are showing critical damage," Colonel Martinez reported. 7 ships remaining in fighting condition." The celebration was short-lived. The surviving hegemony vessels, their formation shattered and their confidence broken, began to glow with an ominous red light. Energy readings spiked beyond anything they had previously detected. "Admiral," Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, his voice tight with fear, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups from all remaining ships. This isn't targeting individual cities anymore. They're preparing to glass the entire surface of the planet." Chen felt her blood turn to ice. A planetary bombardment would kill everything on Earth's surface, regardless of how well hidden their facilities were. Humanity had hurt the aliens, but now they were about to pay the ultimate price for their defiance. "Time to full charge," she demanded. 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Chen stared at the tactical display, watching the energy readings climb steadily toward weapons release. Around her, the command center had fallen silent as everyone realized what was about to happen. They had given the aliens a bloody nose, but it wouldn't matter if everyone on Earth was dead in 5 minutes. "Ma'am," Dr. Hawthorne said quietly, "there might be one option. It's completely insane, but it might work." At this point, Doctor, insane might be exactly what we need. We still have one ace in the hole, Project Lazarus. Every officer in the command center turned to stare at Hawthorne. Project Lazarus was theoretical, untested, and potentially as dangerous to Earth as to the aliens. It was also their only remaining option. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, weighing the choice between certain death and a plan that might kill them all anyway. When she opened them again, her decision was written clearly on her face. "Do it," she ordered. "Activate Project Lazarus." As Hawthorne's fingers flew over her control panel, Chen allowed herself one final look at the tactical display. 7 alien ships, each one capable of reducing Earth to a lifeless rock. In 4 minutes, those ships would fire, and human civilization would become nothing more than a footnote in galactic history, unless Project Lazarus worked, unless humanity's greatest gamble paid off. Above Earth's atmosphere, War Commander Zeth Kalar prepared to commit genocide, unaware that he was about to face the most terrifying force in the universe, human beings with nothing left to lose. Project Lazarus had been humanity's most closely guarded secret, born from the darkest possibilities of theoretical physics and the desperate ingenuity of a species facing extinction. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne had spent 15 years developing the technology, praying she would never need to use it. The concept was elegant in its terrifying simplicity. If you couldn't outgun a superior enemy, change the rules of engagement entirely. "Lazarus stations are coming online," Hawthorne reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to unleash. "Quantum field generators achieving synchronization across all 12 global nodes." Admiral Chen watched the countdown timer tick toward planetary annihilation. 3 minutes and 42 seconds until the hegemony ships completed their charge and turned Earth into molten rock. "How long do you need, Doctor?" 2 minutes for full field generation, Admiral, but once we activate the system, there's no going back. The quantum field will affect everything in near-Earth space, including our own installations. Will we survive it? Hawthorne met her gaze steadily. Unknown. The computer models suggest a 73% chance of success, but we've never tested it at full scale. Chen looked around the command center at the faces of her officers. These people had families, loved ones, entire lives that would end in less than 4 minutes if the alien ships fired. The choice was between certain death and uncertain survival. "Activate Lazarus," she ordered. Hidden beneath the Earth's surface, 12 massive installations hummed to life. Each facility contained a quantum field generator of unprecedented power, devices that could manipulate the fundamental forces of space-time itself. The technology was based on humanity's studies of black hole physics, dark matter research, and theoretical work on the nature of the universe. What Project Lazarus did was remarkably simple. It created localized distortions in the quantum vacuum, areas where the laws of physics operated differently than they did in normal spacetime. Aboard the dominant Fang, War Commander Zeth Kalar felt the first indication that something was wrong when his ship's artificial gravity began to fluctuate. Small objects on the bridge started to drift upward, while others suddenly became impossibly heavy. "War Commander," Tactical Officer Kreshitar reported, his voice tinged with growing panic. I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the local area. The gravitational field is becoming unstable. Zethkalar's compound eyes focused on the sensor readings with growing alarm. The space around the primitive planet was wrong. Energy readings fluctuated wildly. Distances seemed to shift without reason, and the laws of physics appeared to be breaking down. "What kind of weapon is this?" he demanded. "Unknown, War Commander. Our sensors cannot properly analyze the phenomenon. It appears to be some form of spatial manipulation technology, but that should be impossible for such a primitive species." On Earth's surface, the effects of Project Lazarus were immediately visible. The sky itself began to shimmer and distort, creating aurora-like displays as charged particles were twisted through dimensions that didn't quite exist. The very air seemed to thicken, and anyone looking up could see the alien ships wavering like mirages in a desert. "Field generation at 60%, Hawthorne announced. "The quantum distortion is beginning to affect local space-time." Admiral Chen watched the tactical display with fascination and horror. The alien ships, previously sharp and distinct on the sensors, were now represented by fuzzy, shifting blobs as their exact positions became impossible to determine. "What exactly is happening to them, Doctor?" "We're creating a region of space where the normal relationship between matter, energy, and gravity no longer applies consistently," Hawthorne explained, her eyes fixed on the cascade of data flowing across her screens. "Their ships are still there, but they're existing in a space where physics operates according to different rules." "Can they still fire on us?" "Theoretically, yes, but targeting will be nearly impossible when space itself is unstable." Above Earth's atmosphere, the hegemony fleet was discovering the truth of that statement. War Commander Zethkalar watched in mounting rage as his ship's weapons systems struggled to acquire target locks on the planet below. Every time his gunners thought they had a firing solution, the target seemed to shift position without moving. "Weapon status," he snarled. "Charging systems at 85%, War Commander, but targeting computers cannot establish a lock. The planet appears to be in multiple positions simultaneously." "Fire anyway! Saturate the entire area!" But even as Kreshatar prepared to relay the order, the hegemony ships began to experience more serious problems. The quantum field distortions weren't just affecting their ability to target the planet, they were beginning to affect the ships themselves. The dominant Fang's hull began to emit a low, resonant groan as gravitational forces fluctuated across its length. In some areas, the artificial gravity increased to crushing levels, while in others, it disappeared entirely. Crew members found themselves pressed against bulkheads one moment and floating helplessly the next. "Engineering reports massive stress fractures developing in the hull," Kreshatar reported. "The structural integrity field is fluctuating beyond acceptable parameters." Through the bridge's observation ports, Zethkalar could see the other surviving ships of his fleet suffering similar fates. The massive vessel Eternal Conquest was actually bending in the middle, its 2-kilometer length twisted into an impossible curve by gravitational forces that varied along its hull. Sparks cascaded from ruptured power conduits as the ship's systems failed one by one. "Field generation at 90%, Hawthorne announced. "Admiral, I'm reading catastrophic structural failures across the enemy fleet." Chen allowed herself a moment of fierce satisfaction. "They came here expecting to face primitives with chemical rockets and crude lasers. Instead, they're learning what happens when you pick a fight with a species that splits atoms for fun and bends space-time as a hobby." The quantum field reached full power with a sensation like reality itself taking a deep breath. Across Earth's surface, every human being felt a momentary disorientation as their local space-time was briefly redefined. Birds fell silent, domestic animals huddled in confusion, and sensitive individuals reported seeing colors that had no names. For the hegemony fleet, the experience was far more dramatic. The massive alien ships, designed to operate in the ordered physics of normal space, simply could not cope with an environment where up and down were suggestions, where mass and energy exchanged properties randomly, and where the speed of light was more of a polite recommendation than an absolute limit. One by one, the great vessels began to tear themselves apart. The relentless fury, caught in a gravitational eddy that compressed its forward section while stretching its aft compartments, broke in half with a sound like tearing metal that somehow carried through the vacuum of space. The inevitable victory found itself existing in 17 dimensions simultaneously, its crew experiencing the unique sensation of being scattered across multiple realities before mercifully losing consciousness. "War Commander!" Kreshatar gasped, his voice distorted as the bridge's atmosphere began to behave more like a liquid than a gas. "Recommend immediate withdrawal. Our ships cannot survive in this spatial anomaly." Zeth-Kalar wanted to refuse, wanted to order his remaining vessels to fire regardless of the consequences. His pride, his duty to the hegemony, everything he had been trained to value, demanded that he continue the attack even if it destroyed his entire fleet. But survival instincts, older than civilization itself, overrode military training. Whatever these humans had done, it was beyond anything the hegemony had ever encountered. His mighty fleet, capable of reducing entire star systems to rubble, was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought with the fundamental forces of the universe itself. "All ships," he transmitted, his voice thick with defeat and growing terror. "Emergency jump to hyperspace. Retreat from this madness." The surviving hegemony vessels, their hulls creaking and sparking as they fought against impossible physics, desperately attempted to activate their faster-than-light drives. Under normal circumstances, the jump to hyperspace would have taken mere seconds. But these were not normal circumstances. The quantum field distortions that Project Lazarus had created made hyperspace travel extremely dangerous. Space-time itself was unstable, and attempting to pierce the barrier between dimensions in such an environment was like trying to thread a needle during an earthquake. Two ships, the Merciless Blade and the Iron Domination, managed to achieve hyperspace transition, though not without cost. Both vessels emerged from the jump thousands of light years from their intended destination, their crews suffering from temporal displacement effects that would take months to recover from. The remaining 4 ships were not so fortunate. The crushing will attempted to jump just as its position in space-time shifted to accommodate the quantum field. The result was a spectacular explosion, as the ship was simultaneously in normal space and hyperspace, existing in both dimensions until the stress tore it apart at the molecular level. The final authority succeeded in opening a hyperspace portal, but the unstable physics caused the portal to collapse while the ship was halfway through. The forward half of the vessel disappeared into hyperspace, while the aft section remained in normal space, both halves sealed by emergency bulkheads as the crew fought desperately to survive. The dominant Fang, War Commander Zeth-Kalar's flagship, was the last to attempt escape. As the great ship's hyperspace drive charged, Zeth-Kalar stared at the innocent-looking blue planet below and felt something he had never experienced in his centuries of conquest. Genuine fear. These humans were not the primitives his intelligence reports had suggested. They were something far more dangerous, a species that refused to accept the impossible. The hyperspace jump engaged just as the quantum field reached a resonance peak. For a moment, the dominant Fang existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, its crew experiencing sensations that their minds could not process. When the ship finally stabilized in hyperspace, nearly half the crew was catatonic from the experience, and Zeth-Kalar himself bore scars that would never fully heal. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display as the last alien signatures disappeared from her screens. The quantum field had dissipated as the Lazarus generators powered down, leaving normal space-time in its wake. Around the command center, Her officers stared at the displays in stunned silence. "Status report," Chen said quietly. "All enemy vessels have been destroyed or driven off," Colonel Martinez reported, his voice filled with amazement. "Debris patterns suggest complete destruction of at least 11 ships. We're detecting no active alien technology in Earth orbit." Dr. Hawthorne looked up from her console, her face pale but triumphant. "Project Lazarus performed within acceptable parameters. The quantum field generators are powering down normally, and local space-time is returning to baseline stability." Chen walked to the observation window and looked up at the sky. Somewhere among the stars, the survivors of the hegemony fleet were retreating, carrying word of humanity's unexpected capabilities back to their masters. The immediate threat was over. But she knew this was only the beginning. "Doctor," she said, "how long would it take to build more Lazarus installations?" Hawthorne smiled grimly. "With the data from this test, Admiral, 6 months for the first new facility, then 1 per month after that. And now that we know the technology works, I have some ideas for improvements." Admiral Chen nodded slowly. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was not the primitive species they appeared to be. Earth had been attacked by a superior enemy and had not merely survived, but had sent that enemy fleeing in terror. When the hegemony returned, and Chen was certain they would return, they would find humanity ready. Earth would never again be caught unprepared. In the depths of space, aboard the crippled Dominant Fang, War Commander Zeth Kalar dictated his report to the Hegemony High Command. His words would echo through the corridors of power across 1,000 worlds, carrying a warning that would reshape galactic politics forever. The species known as humans are to be reclassified as a Class Alpha threat. Recommend immediate cessation of all contact until further study. They are not what they appear to be. They are something far more dangerous, a species that weaponizes the universe itself. Humanity had passed its first test among the stars, but they had also earned the attention of forces beyond their imagination. The war for Earth's survival was over. The war for humanity's place in the galaxy had just begun.